There is no ocean here, no harbor lights, no container cranes stretching into a salt-stung sky, no tankers ghosting the horizon, just the ancient, landlocked heart of West Africa, a country of 22 million people, surrounded on all sides by other nations, separated from the nearest coast by hundreds of kilometers of road, politics, and somebody else's port. For more than 6 decades since independence, Burkina Faso has moved its imports and exports across corridors it does not control, through Abidjan, through Lomé, through Tema and Cotonou. Every ton of cargo, every bag of cement, every shipment of machinery, every tank of fuel has had to negotiate its way through the ports and the bureaucracies of neighboring states. That is what it means to be landlocked, not merely a geographic fact, a structural vulnerability, a permanent lever that others can pull. And then, in September 2022, a young artillery captain named Ibrahim Traoré seized power in Ouagadougou. He was 34 years old. He became the youngest sitting head of state in the world.
34-year-old Ibrahim Traoré is the new self-declared leader of Burkina Faso. He overthrew the president, Paul-Henri Damiba, alongside a group of soldiers.
And almost immediately, he began asking a question that nobody in power had taken seriously before. What if we stopped waiting for the coast to rescue us? And again, he reminded other leaders about choice Africa has.
We have only 2 choices. Either we put an end to imperialism once and for all, or we remain slaves until we disappear.
Welcome to the world of research. Welcome to the large family of WIN, Wisdom in Narrations.
We will tell them that Africa is a continent of hope, a continent of fighters, and Africa is a continent of the future. And we are going to fight for that.
To understand what Traoré is attempting to build, you first need to understand what was already broken. And to understand that, you need to go back to a map. Burkina Faso sits at the geographic center of West Africa, surrounded by 6 countries: Mali to the north and west, Niger to the east, Benin, Togo, and Ghana to the south, and Côte d'Ivoire to the southwest. It has no coastline, not a centimeter. And in the global trading system, that is not a minor inconvenience. It is a structurally defining constraint. According to the Digital Logistics Capacity Assessment maintained by the UN Logistics Cluster, a key planning resource for humanitarian and commercial operators, Burkina Faso imports 98% of its merchandise by sea, relying on 4 main coastal corridors: Lomé in Togo, Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire, Cotonou in Benin, and the Ghanaian ports of Tema and Takoradi. The country has only one established dry port, a facility in Bobo Dioul Lasso, operated through its Chamber of Commerce, where customs clearance and logistics services are provided inland. One for an entire nation. A comparative study of West African transit corridors published by the World Maritime University found that the Abidjan-Ouagadougou rail and road corridor stretches approximately 1,148 kilometers from the Ivorian coast to the Burkinabe capital. That is a long journey for a bag of rice, even longer for a turbine, even longer when border procedures slow everything to a crawl. A 2019 World Bank report titled Enhancing Burkina Faso Regional Connectivity, an Economic Corridor Approach, laid out the structural problem in clinical detail. It found that Burkina Faso and its landlocked neighbors were running significant trade imbalances that made their logistics even more expensive, because transport prices on northbound, fully loaded cargo flows had to compensate for the largely empty southbound return journeys. In other words, geography created a cost loop that compounded disadvantage over time. The research published by Science Direct in June 2023, a study on stagnant logistics growth simulation across West African intermodal corridors, confirmed that multiple ports compete to serve Burkina Faso, and that the balance of power between them shifts dramatically based on politics. Between 2008 and 2016, Lomé overtook Abidjan as the dominant port for Burkinabe cargo. That shift happened partly because of political instability in Côte d'Ivoire. When politics change, trade routes change. When routes change, costs spike. And who pays? Not the politicians, the farmer, the trader, the citizen. And then came the sanctions. When the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, threatened military intervention following Niger's 2023 coup and eventually imposed sweeping financial and trade sanctions on the three Sahel states, the economic consequences for landlocked nations were severe and immediate. As Danielle Resnick, a senior research fellow at the International Food Policy Research Institute, wrote in an article for The Conversation, Benin's revenues at the port of Cotonou, the main transit source for goods entering Niger, fell dramatically. The sanctions on Mali badly hurt revenue generation at Senegal's port of Dakar. Though food was officially exempt, the disruption of transport logistics drove sharp food price inflation across the Sahel. The news everywhere was,
millions of people in the Sahel region are staring at a looming food crisis driven by conflict, climate change, and economic turmoil.
According to a May 2025 analysis from the Eurafrica Press, citing World Bank estimates, the combined GDP of the Alliance of Sahel States had contracted by 3.8% in 2024, against a regional average growth of 2.1%. Inflation in Burkina Faso exceeded 15%. Food insecurity affected nearly a quarter of households across the Sahel. This is what geography costs, and this is the fire in which Traoré's vision was forged.
They expected a nation without a single drop of seawater to collapse, beg for mercy, and surrender its sovereignty. But the planners of this economic siege made a fatal mistake. They forgot that geography is only a prison if you accept its walls, and they completely underestimated the willpower of a united people led by a commander who refuses to bow.
Ibrahim Traoré did not inherit a functioning infrastructure state. He inherited a country where, since independence in 1960, successive governments had managed to pave just 3,642 kilometers of roads in 64 years. 64 years. What he proposed, quite simply, was to surpass that total in a single generation of accelerated construction. According to a detailed report published in May 2025 by TTY Brand Africa, Traoré's government launched an ambitious program to build 5,000 kilometers of new paved roads across the country. Uniquely, the plan stipulates no foreign contractors. Equipment was sourced directly, including construction machinery shipped from neighboring Ghana, and young Burkinabe workers were trained on site. The message was deliberate and explicit. We will build our own infrastructure with our own hands, and the capability stays with our people.
And right now in 2026, major expansion and modernization efforts are changing this corridor faster than many people expected. Because this is not just another road project. This highway is becoming one of the most important economic and transport upgrades currently happening in Burkina Faso.
But roads, as any logistics engineer will tell you, are only part of the story. Roads without intermodal terminals are just corridors without anchors. You can move goods across them, but you cannot process, consolidate, store, or redistribute efficiently without nodes, inland hubs that replicate the functions of a port deep in the hinterland. These are called dry ports, and Burkina Faso's dry port ambitions are central to the entire strategic corridor concept. A peer-reviewed article published in the journal Transportation Research Interdisciplinary Perspectives in late 2025 a systematic literature review and bibliometric analysis of dry port studies across Africa, found that dry ports in the African context serve three primary functions beyond mere decongestion. They respond to structural constraints such as weak inland connectivity and customs friction. They are governed by institutional arrangements that strongly determine their performance, and they function as nodes within regional corridor systems that extend far beyond any single country's logistics network. That third function is the key. A dry port is not just a warehouse, it is a geopolitical instrument. It defines who controls the movement of goods, and Burkina Faso already had a glimpse of what was possible. The dry port at Bobo Dioulasso, sitting on the Dori-Abidjan corridor, demonstrated proof of concept. The report published by How We Made It in Africa in April 2022, titled Dry Ports Becoming Key to Improved Logistics and Trade in Africa, cited both the Bobo Dioulasso dry port and the Dosso facility in Niger as examples of the potential that inland terminals hold for landlocked Sahel nations. Traoré's administration has moved to multiply and modernize these nodes, embedding them into a broader multimodal network connecting the capital Ouagadougou to multiple coastal gateways through reinforced transit veins. On the 16th of October 2024, the Council of Ministers under President Traoré formally adopted the Faso-Mebo initiative.
Faso-Mebo, cette initiative qui fait donc des émules, on se souvient donc de cette remise symbolique, très symbolique, d'un sac de ciment.
A program whose name in the local Mure language translates simply as Build the Country. And then there is Faso Rail. In a radio broadcast from the Kuluba Palace reported by Logist Africa, President Traoré laid out the case starkly. The existing railway infrastructure, he said, was so degraded that no modern locomotive could run on it. The current 622 kilometers of meter-gauge track, part of the historic Abidjan-Ouagadougou Railway, had become a corridor in name only. His government's response? Don't just fix the tracks, build the factory that makes the tracks. In August 2024, the government of Burkina Faso announced plans for Faso Rail, a new state-owned company with a 75% government shareholding, backed by an investment of 70 billion CFA francs, roughly 110 million euros. As reported by GBC1, Faso Rail's mandate begins with producing rail tracks locally, then extends to wagons and spare parts, and ultimately, through technology transfer with a strategic partner, to locomotive manufacturing. According to Africa Supply Chain magazine's reporting on Burkina Faso's railway program, the government earmarked $53 million in railway investment starting in 2026, with a focus on local job creation and regional integration. The broader goal? A 590-kilometer standard gauge railway connecting Ouagadougou to the port of Tema in Ghana, part of a 1,000-kilometer Ghana-Burkina Faso interconnectivity project. According to Wikipedia's entry on the Tema-Mpakadan railway line, the Ghana section, funded by India's Export-Import Bank at $440 million, was inaugurated in November 2024, bringing Burkina Faso's connection to Tema dramatically closer to realization.
We must remember one thing: there is no revolution in any field that can last without the involvement of the masses.
This is the synthetic coastline taking shape, not metaphorically, literally, standard gauge rails, new dry port hubs, road arteries hardened against axle loads that current infrastructure cannot bear. A corridor system engineered from the inside out, designed to give a landlocked nation the logistical footprint of a maritime power. If there is a single engineering decision that best encapsulates the audacity of what Traoré's government is attempting, It is this, the shift from meter gauge to standard gauge. This matters more than it might sound. Meter gauge railways, 1,000 millimeters between the rails, are cheaper to build and were the colonial legacy across much of Francophone West Africa. But they carry less freight per axle, run slower, and, crucially, are incompatible with the modern standard gauge networks being built across the continent. When you build in standard gauge, 1,435 millimeters, the global norm, your trains can eventually roll seamlessly from your hinterland onto a continental network. You are not just building a domestic logistics asset. You are purchasing integration with the future of African trade. The African Union's Programme for Infrastructure Development in Africa, PIDA, has invested heavily in exactly this vision. According to the PIDA investment prospectus, there is already a fully specified project on the books, the Abidjan, Ouagadougou, Niamey, Cotonou, Lomé Regional Rail Loop. This would be an integrated standard gauge railway network connecting the capital cities of 5 West African nations, Burkina Faso and Niger among them, providing each landlocked country with rail access to not one, but multiple coastal ports simultaneously. The network would employ advanced signaling, digital management systems, and intermodal terminals at key locations. It is designed to reduce transportation costs, support the African Continental Free Trade Area, and shift cargo from road to more energy-efficient rail. What Traoré's government is doing through Faso Rail and the Rail Modernization Program is positioning Burkina Faso to be a participant in that loop rather than a bystander to it. But the most geopolitically striking element of Burkina Faso's emerging logistics strategy lies not to the south, toward the Gulf of Guinea, but to the north, toward Morocco, toward the Atlantic. An April 2025 article published by The Voice of Africa titled Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger forge new trade corridor with Morocco amid ECOWAS rift, reported on the emerging partnership between the Alliance of Sahel states and Morocco as a critical trade gateway. The logic is elegant and powerful. Morocco's flagship port, Tanger Med, is one of Africa's largest and most globally connected maritime facilities, linking over 180 ports worldwide. It sits on the Strait of Gibraltar, at the intersection of Atlantic and Mediterranean shipping lanes. If the AES nations can secure logistics corridors to Morocco's northern coast, they effectively tap into a global shipping network without relying on the ECOWAS coastal states that have historically controlled and sometimes weaponized their access. The talks, according to the report, focus on extending and upgrading road and rail links connecting the Sahel to Moroccan ports, along with dry port development, customs coordination, and cross-border logistics infrastructure. This is the revitalization of the Trans-Saharan Trade Corridor, a network of routes that for centuries connected sub-Saharan Africa to Mediterranean and Atlantic commerce, now being reimagined with tarmac, steel rails, and automated dry port hubs. A December 2025 report by the Policy Center for the New South, titled Corridors of the Alliance of Sahel States, Logistical Vulnerabilities, Security Constraints, and Adaptation Dynamics, documented how Burkina Faso had already been reorientating its freight flows toward the Lomé corridor through Togo, whose port handled 30.6 million metric tons of total traffic in 2024, partly because Togo remained neutral in the ECOWAS-AES conflict and offered a predictable operational framework. This adaptive logistics geography, rotating between Togo, Ghana, and potentially Morocco, depending on political configurations, is not just crisis management. It is the architecture of resilience. The more corridors, Burkina Faso controls or co-manages, the less leverage any single coastal state holds over its economic survival.